We're not just watching the old economy die. We're standing at the gateway of a brand new era, one in which technology drives everything. Are you prepared for this mega shift in the way the world works? Well, let's unpack the needs you have in this episode of The Steve Beeman Show. Welcome back, my friends. I'm Steve Beeman, as you know, and I'm pleased to be with you. And I want to thank you for taking the time to once again tune in with me and watch this. I do hope if you like the video, you'll click on the like button below and subscribe. We're looking at some enhanced content we can get for our subscribing members. And I want to thank those who've written me at steve@stevebeeman.com. We are hoping to go live shortly so that I can interact with you live, which would be far and away my preference. Obviously, we get a lot of questions in the email thing, but that's a recorded situation. So it's a little more difficult. But I look forward to going live and talking with all of you very directly. The thesis of today's podcast is one I watched, and I published an article about the bioterrorism situation that happened in Michigan with the student from Michigan who's a member of the Communist Chinese Party and a citizen of China, bringing in a very dangerous pathogen, one that could dramatically hurt the American food supply. This is really frightening stuff. And when I did my whole podcast on the risks of technology and AI, this is just one of the risks that we have. We watch then the social unrest once again rising in the United States. You can argue why it's happening or why it's not. It doesn't matter. It's social unrest. And most normal people don't want to deal with it. They don't want to be driving their car down the road and have a problem getting to work or getting home from work. So all of that leads into a discussion about what's really going on. And we're trying to figure it out each and every episode. A lot of it's economic. We've seen a massive increase in our national debts over the last 20 years. We've seen an increase in our budgets growing through Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, and now interest on the debt, which has gotten so big. We see geopolitically situations in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in the Far East. Everywhere you look, there's chaos. Well, it's no real surprise then that people are getting unrested or unrestful and, going out to do things. A little bit of it's probably good for the country. Too much of it's not so hot. But anyway, we're looking at the causes behind these things and the changes coming forth in the digital economy. I've done a lot of speaking about this since the early 2000s, and I'm a big believer that in this coming digital economy, the world doesn't look like it always has. It's a very different place for you and for me. Well, here's the reality. We saw our economies long ago, and for those of you who haven't studied history, I urge you to, because you can learn lessons that apply to today. But long ago, we went through the agricultural revolution, and this is kind of how we started as a society, going back thousands of years, but we learned how to domesticate animals, and we learned how to grow crops. So we became an agricultural-driven society. Here in the United States, that's how we were from its founding up until the mid-1800s. And in the mid-1800s, we began to see what's been called the Industrial Revolution. And that was the implementation of machines that could replicate some of the human services and enhance human behavior. Well, the Industrial Revolution gave us great wealth, great facilities for convenience, enhanced consumer products, better lifestyles. If you compare our lifestyle today to what it was 150 years ago, there's really no comparison. But the Industrial Revolution began to give way to the financial economy, the financial revolution of the 80s. Now, we've talked in some prior podcasts about why we have the steel and the basic industries leaving the country. Some of it had to do with trade policy, no question. Some of it had to do with digitization, no question. Some of it had to do with financial markets, no question. All of it together, though, drove out the middle class from at least the United States and transferred a great deal of U.S. wealth to foreign countries. Okay, well, here we are, years later and decades later, and we have an administration in the United States trying to repatriate those jobs based on different trade policy. Will that work? I don't know. I mean, we're all kind of waiting with bated breath to see if, in fact, the president's plan will come to fruition. We don't know. I'm hopeful that it will. I mean, he's really taken 4 steps to revitalize the American economy: restructure trade, deregulate the economy, continue with tax cuts so we put more free money into the free economy, and bring fresh capital in so that you spurn growth. Will those work? I sure hope so. I think the jury's out and we have to see. But theoretically, they should work and they should build our economy back to a growth rate greater than 3%, which could allow us to overcome some of this debt because we can grow our way out of it. I know some people want to raise taxes on people, but I will tell you, when you raise taxes, you don't grow the economy. What you do when you raise taxes is you stifle the economy. It's just that simple. Free people with free use of their earned money is what builds an economy. So I think we have difference of opinion on those things. I am not a Keynesian, as most of you can imagine. I think Keynes was wrong, and he said he was wrong. But when put into the position of saying in the long run, this Keynesian economics doesn't work, his comment was, in the long run, we're all dead. I tend to be much more on the Adam Smith side that believes that the invisible hand of the free market is what we want, and that free individuals making free choices is what builds a good economy. But with all that said, I believe now we're moving out of the industrial era and out of the financial era into what I've called the digital economy. That digital economy can be seen taking over in everything from the release of Bitcoin and what it's done to the imposition really now of the blockchain, the whole new world of AI, which most of you are able to touch. If you go to ChatGPT or Grok or any of the public sites, you can begin to touch the large language models that are the foundation of the whole AI stuff. When you tie that together with robotics and machine learning, we're entering a new era for certain. This era will not look like it did, and it will change everything. The only difference is to get from the agricultural era to the industrial era took about 70 years. To get from the industrial era to the financial era took about 70 years. This transition to the digital era is going to happen in a much shorter period of time, 10, 20 years. So that those of you who are in your millennials or Gen Zs, you're going to see this play out in your lifetime. I think if you're a late boomer, you'll see it play out in your life, and certainly the Generation X and that middle ground between the boomers and the Zs, you're going to see it play out. So this is very real, and we can see it again through the rise of crypto and the impact of that, the rise of the meta space, the really early stage of video conferencing, which if you look at Zoom, it's kind of an early stage video conferencing system. Enhancements in working in the computer and working in the blockchain are going to come out in massive quantities over the next 5 years. And when I say that, think about Web 1 being a billboard. You go out and you put a brochure up about your company. Okay, that's pretty boring. We look at that now historically and say, well, that was an early stage web. Web 1.0, you put up a billboard. Web 2.0 gave us the ability to interact with that billboard. We could have commerce. We could buy things. We could get better descriptions of things. We could communicate, through the web. Web 3 gave us the integration of the meta space. You saw that Facebook changed its name to Meta because of the belief of Mark Zuckerberg in the entirety and the power of what will become the metaverse. Virtual reality, augmented reality, all of these things will come into your lives as the Web 3 model expands more and more. But I think we're now beyond that. I think we're into Web 4. And when I talk about Web 4.0, it's the integration of Web3 metaspace and virtual reality together with artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, and all of these technologies. When you put them all into a single usable platform for people, well, that's when you're going to start seeing real changes come to how you work, how you play, and how you interact with your friends and neighbors around the world. So as we go forward today, we increasingly are living in two Americas. There's going to be the digitally fluent America and the digitally naive or ignorant world. I've talked about this before. In fact, in my book on the coming 10-10 economy or coming digital economy, I talk about the 10-10-10 thing. It's been my belief for 15 years that we're headed toward a bifurcated economy in which you have owners, operators, and innovators, and then everybody else. When machines can do the basic jobs that we have, and we no longer need truck drivers and delivery people, and all this stuff's automated, what does that do? What does that look like for people? What happens when robotics can take over not 10% of the jobs like they do now, but 90% of the jobs? That's a hugely different world for you and me. And so we see the bifurcation of those who understand and adapt this technology to those who don't. This program and all that I do is to bring you into the digital age. Obviously, I have concerns about the United States as a nation. I'm a citizen of the United States. I love the principles of the United States, and I would like to see those sustained. Liberty, freedom, self-reliance. I think those are all good things. But the digital age is going to bring challenges to that model. In one, it's either going to go one of two ways: massive government control, massive, or massive freedom, in which we, the people, really can govern our own lives. Now, that's unfair and it's unequal, but it's freedom. Technology is going to allow us to do that in a huge way. And let's understand that when I talk about the digital economy, I'm not talking about social media. I'm not talking about crypto. I'm talking about decentralized finance where everybody can just work with everybody else. There's no need to use the SWIFT system in banking, no need to use ACHs or wires. If you want to send me money, you Zelle me money, and it's immediate, it's instant, no slippage. It goes to a question of how the banks are going to survive this. Banks earn a lot of fees off of the money transfers you do between you and your friends and family. Businesses, when they write checks, all of these things have cost. Well, the new economy, the decentralized tokenized economy, has none of those costs. If you want to send me money, you just click a button and I have the money. If I want to send that person money, I click a button and they have the money. Now, will that be dollars or will it be Bitcoins or will it be custom tokens for that work that we're doing? I've talked a lot about frequent flyer miles, by the way, as a model for the tokenized economy. Well, when you have United frequent flyer miles and want to buy a ticket, you just click and those miles buy your ticket. Well, who says you can't have a United token that buys tickets, rents the car, rents the hotel, and everything else? It's not a currency, it's a token. You're bartering. That's an advanced system. And that's where we're headed, which is much more efficient, much less friction felt, and a lot cheaper and broader based. People in the most undeveloped parts of the world can have instant access to advanced currency management. That's all good stuff. And that's far beyond where we are today with just thinking Amazon's, technology and the digital economy. It's not about that at all. We're talking about a completely decentralized, tokenized system. And that leads to another area that you're going to hear more and more about, and that's called a distributed autonomous system or a distributed autonomous organization, a DAO. And these things are interesting. What's happened is the corporation you're familiar with, it's always been, do you want to start a company? You can either be a sole proprietor, a partnership, or a corporation. Those are your pretty big three options. Within the corporation, you can be a full C Corp, which means it's an independent standalone entity. You can be an S Corp, in which that standalone entity is taxed directly to the owners. You get some tax benefits on that. Or now what's evolved is the limited liability company. Those can be managed as a sole partnership or as a corporation. It depends how you define it in the member agreement. So the corporations have evolved as our way of understanding how businesses run. The blockchain and smart contracts give us the ability to have something completely new. Again, a distributed autonomous organization or a DAO. What this is, this would be akin to a corporation, but a corporation fully owned and fully controlled by the stakeholders. Now, in corporations, you have shareholders, But those shareholders have limited say in how that company's truly run. They hire the board of directors, and the board of directors sets the policies on which the company runs. Under a DAO, the stakeholders have all the say. They are the board of directors. They're the ones who come together through the agreements prior made in the smart contracts on how they govern the enterprise that they're working on. In the digital economy, the DAOs will take over for the corporations, because if you have free access to your money and transferences of your money on an individual basis, well, you want to have individual control over the investments you make and the areas that you get involved. I think the DAOs are going to revolutionize how corporations are done. 100 years from now, they're going to look back and say the corporations, as they were structured, were filled with friction. The digital economy is all about getting rid of friction. So the DAOs become a new way of corporate organization, which gives the stakeholders all the say in how it's run. But in addition to tokenizations and corporate organizations, we're going to begin seeing AI come in as live, real-time salespeople, assistants, concierges, secretaries, whatever you want to call it. AI is going to take over that function for you, building and or running your business or your DAO. It's going to take it over so that you get the support you need for no cost with no friction. That's exciting. But again, think about what it talks to. We go to the disruption of it on employment, right? But at the same time, for those producing products at the individual level, it expands their capabilities for no cost. Someone said to me recently, well, not just once, I've heard it time and time again, how Walmart was so bad for small retailers. It was a change in how retail was done. But as much as it was bad for small retailers, it was wonderful for small manufacturers. Mom and pop stores around the country that made products could get them distributed overnight in Walmart. They could have a national footprint with their product. That's a transitory thing. Yes, it displaced here, but it created opportunity here. If you look at Amazon, now there's good and bad to Amazon. I think it's probably the number one fencing operation in the world, because there are situations with the products put up there aren't legally acquired. But by the same token, Amazon also gives small manufacturers, the mom and pop manufacturers, immediate access to a global audience. And how many people have made money setting up stores, retail stores on the web that pull product out of Amazon and these other places? Shopify's a huge example of that. A lot of people make money on Shopify stores. So they've created their own retail stores in the web, in the digital space. All the while, the physical retail stores are beginning to see their demise. So this digital transformation that we're seeing is going to have winners and losers. My hope is that we can put you on the side of a winner. Again, if the retail stores are going out of business in the physical world, let's work to build them in the virtual world. If your job is being lost because technology is taking it over, maybe you can take your expertise and build a product that can be sold digitally. Not a digital product, perhaps, but a physical product sold at the Amazons in the digital commerce areas. There's a lot of ways to benefit from what's going on, but in order to do so, you have to be up to speed on technology and what it really means. This is not a time when you can turn the other way and say, I don't need to know about that. Yes, you do. It's going to change everything that you operate. Every premise that you've believed is going to change as a result of this. When you see business platforms transition into Web 4 with metaspace or virtual space, whether it's virtual reality or augmented reality, together with AI, together with machine learning, together with the blockchain, together with tokenization, all of that changes everything fast. I want you to be as up to speed on it as anybody. So again, that's why we talk about this stuff. This is a new frontier in a big way. It's going to reward creativity. I've often called it the idea economy. Because in the old economies, an idea was only as good as your ability to put capital behind it. Henry Ford had a great idea, but he sold himself out to the bankers. And that, if you study Henry Ford, he was not happy about it. But he had to because he needed so much capital to build the big plants that built the cars. More and more, we're bringing that production capital down because you build things in the digital space. And when you build things in the digital space, the cost of building it is nothing close to what it used to be for the old industrial companies. A lot of times now, with an idea, you can build a product, and it's that idea that you can then sell through the digital world and make mega dollars with very little capital investment. That's exciting. That's a good thing coming out of this, but it's happening. And you can do that today. So again, this new frontier that will increasingly reward creativity requires a new level of education. We no longer can educate kids assuming they're going to go work in a factory, which is what the American education model is built on. I think around the globe, you're going to see a resurgence of true education, which is critical thinking, creative thinking, and what's called the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We're going to have that, and you're going to see more and more people using alternative systems to the general school systems, whether they're charter schools or homeschooled or whatever that blended model may be. Education is going to change enormously as a result of these technological changes. Zoom taught us in the pandemic that you could educate, remotely. It also showed us some of the problems with that. But as an early attempt to adopt visual technology and video technology, that worked out okay. If we can, through Web 4, make it more immersive, but make it more controlled so that kids actually get the education they need, well, that changes everything. For small businesses, the revolutions that we're going to see in the digital age affect you dramatically because you're no longer at the mercy of the big guys. You can use technology to leverage your brand and leverage your products immediately on a global basis. That's very exciting, but you have to know how to do it, and you have to know how not to be scammed. There's an awful lot of dishonesty that goes on in the web because it is virtual and because you can be anything, anytime. And the computers don't have as long a memory as you'd like to think. So if you're looking for new capital to help launch a product that you want to take out, careful of the players there because everybody's going to screw you. Sorry about it. That's just the truth. Be very careful. But for the small independent business, and those aren't necessarily synonymous, by the way, some independent businesses are big. But if you're in that world of independent businesses, the ability to utilize Web 4 with AI, machine learning, and all these technologies is going to be able to reduce your cost, reduce your friction, and increase your ability to serve your customers. At the end of the day, that's a good thing. As you look at just middle America and those of us who live in the heartland, and when you talk middle America, it's a mindset. So I don't care if you live in New York, California, Minnesota, or Florida, Texas, or anywhere in between, that idea of middle American values of family, faith, fidelity, all these things that have built this great country, those still hold true. But the digital age will increase the complexity of that. We saw that with social media. The impact social media had on relationships in this country is demonstrable. Because it opens up so much communication for adults as well as kids, you have an entirely, what would I say, a destabilizing influence out of social media. But that's the beginning. That's not the end. We're kind of going to have to bank on the Gen Zs and the millennials coming through, raising their kids technology savvy so they don't get abused in the open communications of social media, especially as we get into Web 4 where it's more immersive. I'll give you an example. I've talked about video games. When I grew up, Pong was the thing, and it was fun. You could play it, but it was kind of lame. When my kids were growing up, you had everything from Frogger to the more fun ones were the race cars where you'd get a steering wheel and you'd have brakes, you'd have a foot pedal and brakes, and you'd drive around a track. It's a visual representation of the real thing, but you feel more and more like you're actually driving the car. Roll that clock forward. How far away are we from that person putting on a helmet, putting on gloves, and now driving it in a virtual reality where they actually are in the car? That's moving from working with the computer to working in the computer. And we're going to see that more and more. So if it's been challenging to keep kids from letting tech take over their lives, well, it's going to be there in increasing ways. But it's not necessarily bad. Immersion into the computer can be a good thing. It can be good to have better education, better knowledge, better experiences. And all that can be very, very positive. But we have to understand that to build and learn in real time is going to change because of this immersion into the web. It's powerful. And if you have children, again, you're in that where they're early and just born or the couple years old, you're going to be wrestling with these issues. You'll have to make sure that this immersive technology of the Web 4 world is there for the benefit of your kids, not the detriment. How easy that would be. But if you look at, then independence, and let's look at you. We go in this country from, Republicans and Democrats and independents, and the independent movement is becoming much more truly independent. It's the independent business. It's the independent parent. It's the independent person. This independence of Web 4 gives you real alternatives to big tech, big government, and big business. And I think that's where the independent movement is going to go. I've had a lot of talks over the last years about government and whether the right's bad, the left is bad, whatever. I would make the argument with you that neither the right nor the left is bad. They both are. What's bad is big government, big business, big education, big pharma, big agri. All of the bigs put together are bad for you and me. Now, there used to be benefit to it because they could aggregate capital and they could make things happen that wouldn't otherwise happen. And I've said this, we feed the world because of big agriculture. But now that's coming full circle to the point where maybe this big is not so good. We saw it again during COVID where big government got in bed with big pharma and they did things that we still don't know the outcomes to. I don't know if we know all the tests being done, all the vaccines being given. I don't know if they're good or bad. I just hope we're adequately testing them and not just using them to buffer the profits of big pharma. But big government's no different. The tax systems they have, the squandering of your money to fill their own political agendas or their own needs, it's you versus them. And it's more so as it's grown bigger and bigger and bigger. The problem is this time government has the ability to monitor you, to watch you, and to control you in ways they never have. So the independents, the people who are in that middle ground, which is growing, are increasingly going to have to understand how technology is useful for them. I had a discussion a couple of years ago about blockchain, and I made the comment that I'm not as worried about world government if I have blockchain control over it. Because under a DAO, using the blockchain, you and I are the control people. If the United States ran, or let's take a city, picture your city, and it runs with a DAO where every citizen gets a stated vote. Well, it's done on the computer, so everybody can do it from home. You don't have to go to the voting booth, and you can vote on issues every day. Those issues then would be truly run by the majority. Now, the governor to that, of course, is we have a constitution where the majority can't get that out of hand, we hope. But in terms of democratic processes, the DAOs and the blockchain bring it to you directly. It eliminates fraud completely, which is why the politicians don't want it. But again, from the person in that independent mindset who wants to build their own business, who wants to build their family their way, all of that's going to be enhanced by technology if you understand how to use it. So it's critically important that you stay up on what's happening with Web 4, meta space or the virtual space, AI, blockchain, machine learning, all of that. And stay up with it in a non-political sense. Don't be afraid of it. It's not going to become Terminator. It could, but I don't think it will. But it won't if we are on top of it. And that's kind of what I'm banking on with you. This is such a big thing, and we've crossed the Rubicon on it. You know, somebody said to me, what would it be like if we didn't have nuclear weapons? Well, the problem is you can't uninvent them. You can't uninvent the internet or uninvent blockchain or AI. It's there, it's with us. The question is, what are you going to do with it? Well, as we move forward in these programs, and again, I hope to go live because it's so critically important you and I have a dialogue about it and can talk about the impact on policy and questions. We have a lot of discussions about economics related to this. It's kind of a funny thing, but overall productivity used to be measured by population growth, or wealth was population growth plus productivity growth. That was your economy's growth. What happens when you don't need new people? What happens when robotics pick the plants? When robotics build the cars? When robotics program the programs? Do we really need the people then? And that goes to the heart of the political issue we have with immigration. Do we really need these people? It depends to what extent we get robotics and AI and blockchain, all that integrated fast, right? If it takes a long Trump, I was talking in a prior podcast about Trump bringing in $7 to $8 or $9 trillion of new capital into the economy. In historical measures, for every billion you bring in, you add, I forget the number of jobs off the top of my head, but this trillions that he's talking about would create such employment demand that we don't have enough people to fill the jobs. Well, that assumes we don't have robotics doing the jobs. I think we're on the verge of seeing robots take over almost all manufacturing. It's exponentially growing. If you go on and use Grok or ChatGPT or any of these public blockchains or large language models in the AI world, you're going to see real quick that these are really cool. They're far better than the search engines. I mean, they can answer questions in real time with you and talk to you like a person. That's the tip of the iceberg. None of this stuff is where it's going to stop. It's exponentially getting smarter. Since I've been using AI on the web 2-3 years now, I've watched it get smarter. I've watched it become deeper with time perspective and wider with more global perspective. You can't stop it. All you can do is become familiar with it, become comfortable with it, and think about how you can use it in your life. You know, just if we go back to simple analogies, the railroad built the Midwest and Western economies. If it wasn't for the railroads, the United States would be nowhere near the economic powerhouse it is. Well, the digital economy can revive it. I mean, we talk about the Rust Belt. The digital economy can fix this, but fix it in a way that we've never seen before. So it's very hard to say what it looks like because we've not seen it. But when it comes to technology, you have to be not a passenger on that train, but a builder of the train. And that's why we're doing what we're doing here. Because I want you to be part of this massive transformation. And it's through knowledge and wisdom and creativity and hopes that we can do that. Highly important stuff, and it will affect your life in your lifetime. This isn't science fiction anymore. What will happen to the US dollar? Well, if we have decentralized finance, it becomes less and less important. What does that do to national sovereignty? What do we do with immigration? If we factor in digitalization of those jobs and robotics, do we really need them? But how do you help them globally? Technology allows you to build their economies too. But what do you do when their governments don't want that to happen? I mean, in this world, we've seen food become a weapon. There's plenty of food to feed the world. But there are several countries that don't want that food to go out because it's a weapon they use against their own citizens. Well, technology is going to be very much the same. Dictatorial governments, specific example, North Korea, don't want this technology to be kind of promoted through their system. It threatens dictatorial regimes. All of this is real, and the economic impacts of it are severe. Again, we'll track economic issues that relate to this daily, but I watch it every day. In fact, I've done some what I call the Beeman Report, which are daily little blurps on the economy. If you'd like to see some of those, let me know. But I want to talk about this as I work in my life to do everything I can to both be part of this transition, but to educate about it. Because as always, I want you to stay safe, stay sovereign, and stay free. I'm Steve Beeman, and thanks for watching.